Okay, all you young'uns and oldsters like myself out there, uh, let's do a little transition from our 2D Windows and other type of drawing formats. And here we're starting at our forum. And on page 4, in our general discussion, a while ago we had a story called The Powerful New Pro 7. And within that Pro 7 we have a nice little boat. And with a problem solving going on, we fixed that to a DXF. So let's download that DXF. And open up a new program. Using our Pro 64 file. And we'll go to a new. And as you see my colors here, let's take a look at how did I do some of this and how did I do some of these things. Well, let's close everything on and out. This here under the window is where your secrets are. Now I've got show and hide because I use that very frequently. Snaps. We have, when we get into solids and surfaces, we can turn on a face on and the work plane snapping to a grid plane. And we have some other items that we can enable. So I'm going to go with the basic default there. And then you see as we're checked off here with the ones that are shown here under the window, let's turn on the inspector, which has the shortcut here. Whether it's on or off. And one of the important ones is the Explorer. Now we see as a default, we open up with layer 1 as the default opening. And I like to use the construction layer, so I'll click that on. Because a lot of times when we do an import of a DXF or a drawing, we'll have that on different layers, and that way with the construction enabled, it will assist us. Now, if there's some other settings that need to go through, here's how to get to our preferences. And we have your colors on the background. Let's say I want to modify my lower left corner here just a little bit. And I'll tilt that on over to a little bit more of a yellow hue. And make that just a little bit darker. And then by red dotting that, and now by pressing apply, we see that color change happening right there. Another thing is the display, whether you want to go with surfaces, curves, solids, and then which resolution, so setting that to superfine. And then you can change your snap angles. I don't generally mess with any of that. Our filing is, if you like to keep a particular pen type and text type, make sure you click these on. And then the general is enabling things. Right now I'm set at aerospace settings. And here is where you find your arrow key nudge distance. You can modify that nudge distance as you like using your keyboard arrows. And then we've got other items as far as the units. display and whether or not you would like inches, architectural feet and inches, or go into the metric system. And pressing OK. Now let's go into importing a file. And here's a drawing in the DXF. And I know that our Gracie file there is in millimeters. So this is one of our new updates that's happened, which will be coming along. And now we simply locate whether we have that stored in our personal document stack or wherever. So here's Gracie, and we'll open her up. And looking at our dimension here in American, up here on our status, we're seeing what's going on. And we see that everything is on Z0 as we're defaulted here to our top view. So I'm going to pause the video here and go ahead and import your drawing. Go ahead and set this video up here on the top. Now, if you're having a hard time viewing the video as far as the Pro 764 and file work plane draw thing is all being hidden, bring your cursor above that line so it's on the most top of the screen, and that will allow that status menu bar to be shown. Let's go to pause here and import your DXF drawing file. Okay, now that we're back, let's do a couple of the smaller basics here. Let's just grab a particular arc, and we see that that's a control point spline, and it's so-and-so color. And we also have on a control point spline, there's not going to be any data allowed to be changed out, compared to this line. We see this data is able to be changed. Now on a control point spline, I'll bump that screen up just a little bit. There's two ways we can change our data, and that's edit, change the object type, and then we have these options available. So if I change this one to lines, pressing OK, and then by using the selection tool, just touching on anything, and then come back and touch on this, we now see a small line, and now we have data applied. And it's very short. So I'm going to undo the convert to lines. Now within the Explorer, this is going to assist us in sorting out what's actually in the drawing. And we see here that we have 0 items except for here on the parent Gracie and then within the model. And then we have now layer 1, and that's where our data is all residing. So take a pause and let's go through that and just research the drawing a little bit. Okay, now that we're getting you more familiar with our our Gracie ship here, let's take a look at our front view here. So by hiding a couple of these controls and using this hide, you see how that particular pieces of information has disappeared from our view. It's still there, it's just out of our viewpoint. And looking at that line with Z0, and we have our length. Now I'm going to go and do a little bit of editing here. So by selecting these particular items and then turning on the view of showing only, we see some extra bits of information that are not really, well, yes they are. Now using my zoom in, now I'm only using the mouse clicking. I'll let you know when we're going to go into our, desktop and which keys we'll be pressing. So here we see some heights, 2 feet 6 up to 12 feet of depth here, and we have some other former station points here. So let's go ahead and include all of that into our front view. So what I'm going to do now is select all of these objects, and now by going into edit and grouping, and then returning to show all, and now I'm using the bracket button just to the right of the letter P on the keyboard. I'm bracketing out to expand the view just a little bit, and now I'm going to click on our group. Now the reason I like to have the inspector open all the time, because sometimes when we're moving things around, that group will unhighlight. So let's zoom out a little bit with that bracket bar and do a move. And this is where sometimes it's easy to get lost, because now we see that the group, now we see that our data is here and it's responding, and with our inspector open we have our group is still here. Now one of the other items that happens within our TurboCAD Explorer is when we see features, we see that there's a group right there, as that being highlighted here within this subject. Now let's go and modify that just a little bit, and we'll go to edit and selecting all, and now within the features we see all of the items that are within this particular drawing. And returning just to our layers here. So let's pause once again and let you sort out doing some grouping and setting things up as you would like. Okay, now that we have our top view here on our status, let's grab a hold of those items, and we see, noticing up here on our status now, As we're blinking intersects, we're grabbing actual entities, lines, the control points, and all of these kind of items. Let's once again create a group there. Within our edit group, and once again with our hiding that, which now leaves us with our side view of Gracie. So let's grab a hold of that. And now when we have multiple items here, and let's see how many items we actually have by grabbing our features, and I'm using my left mouse click and dragging up and down here and seeing what kind of items we have within that list. These are all the features that I've grabbed. Now let's watch what happens to the features when I group them. We've contained all of those into one little handful that we can modify and move around. So let's take another pause and set your drawing up into 3 basic groups. Right now we're not caring too much about the big parts of the detail, as we'll get to those as we need. Okay, ready to see everything on our screen? Returning once again to show all. And we're now on our top view. Let's first of all rotate what would be our front view. Or aft view. So now by going into our rotating, first we have a work pin normal, which means your eye point. So let's take a small look at that. Now one of the other things happening too is if we're in 2D. Now what I've just done here is I've just changed out from being in 3D to the 2D. So let's start right here with our 2D. And we see data, and this is our data points center for our group. So let's do a rotate, and we see that there's only 2 types of rotation because we're only looking at the one view. So we can rotate 3 points, which we won't do right now, or we'll do a single. So now knowing, according to the user guide and things like that, that our rotation direction is counterclockwise, rotating at 45, we see how that's rotating to the counterclockwise. By modifying that to a minus 90, we could have done that rotation in one move. We're now going to go back into the 3D. And now as we see our rotation of 1 point, starting at our work pin, we've just lit up different axes to rotate about. Now our x-axis would be along this way, and our y-axis would be going north and south as we're looking right now. So rotating 1 point on the y-axis, let's give it a click right here on an endpoint. and we see that it shrunk a little bit. Returning once again to 2D, we see there's a cursor call up if we want to transform or not. Basically, we would have a flattened boat at this point where we won't have the full depth. Go to 3D will restore the curves back into their original position. No. And all I want to look at right now is our view. That within our view, even though it's not visible right now, we only see a new view, a user view, and deleting a view. We don't see others. Now returning back into our 3D, and continuing with our rotation on that end point. And now, viewing from what is my aeronautical left side, and now I'm using that bracket button next to the letter P on the keyboard. And I'm going to edit, undo, one rotate. We see how that 45-degree rotate position is here. And now I'm going to redo that rotate. And we'll finish that off. And now viewing from the front or the back, we see that we have an upside down one. Now this is where things will probably get a little bit confusing, because now we're going to look at the x-axis. So let's take a look at our viewing coming into the isometric, and once again using that bracket button next to the letter P on the desk keyboard. Let's modify our rotation here, and we see that we still have this group, even though we do not see that it's highlighted, but it is still active within our inspector here, and an x-axis. And we see here on our status here, noticing up here on the status when we get to the origin, come on there, little feller. I know you can blink for me. Oh, it's searching for a rotate point right now on the x-axis. So now with that rotate available, let's just modify that to 180 degrees. And then pressing decimal or comma over in Europe, that would be the comma, and enter, and we see that the angle is highlighted in gray, but it's still asking for a signal where to rotate around, and we'll click the rotate now, and there we have a right side up boat view, even though we don't have things aligned properly. So let's pause the video there and go through some rotate and taking a look at your view options here, as far as just navigate the screen and take a look at, now that you can see on our front view, we can see what's been changed around, and viewing on our left side. And we'll pause this movie now and come up with part 2 for our next section.